This is Michael from the Sibley Nature Center in Midland, Texas, coming at you again with our newest podcast. You'll notice I'm going a little bit incognito today. I've been having some eye and light sensitivity problems as of late, so you have to bear with me with wearing these shades for today. Today's guest is Barth Robbins. He's a archaeologist, maybe not by profession, but certainly is very knowledgeable about archaeology. And our topic for today is a very fascinating topic about what's known as the Midland Discovery. So we'll just delve right into it. Barth, thank you for participating in this podcast for Sibley Nature Center. I word on the street is that this is your very first podcast, and so I'll do whatever I can to be gentle on you.
Michael, I appreciate that, and I'm glad to be here.
Okay. Well, first off, I kind of like to know a little bit about the person I'm interviewing. Uh, Tell me about your background as a child. Were you interested in archaeology, or what interested you when you were a kid?
Michael, I think my first interest and I can go back as far as my childhood. We lived in a suburb of Chicago, and but my dad and his family grew up on a farm in southern Illinois. So my first recall of any kind of uh, archaeology would have been coming to southern Illinois uh, with a family, visiting my grandfather on the farm, and my brother and I slept upstairs, and there was an artifact up there. It was basically a double grooved Indian axe, um, and it caught my eye. It's interesting. I still think about it today, and I would love to know where it's at. Um, the story I got was that my dad's oldest brother found it right there on the farm, plowing a field. And then, of course, years later, here it is on a shelf in the upstairs room of the old farmhouse where my brother and I slept. So when you go back and I recall, that's the first indications, and of course, I didn't realize it as a kid, that sparked a little bit of interest in the field of archaeology.
Okay. Um, Professionally, what did you do?
Professionally, I was 40 plus years with the oil field. Um, I started with Texaco 1975 in Salem, Illinois, there in southern Illinois, where I grew up, and ended up here in Midland, Texas, um, and finished my career in 2019. Um, and that led me free time to be a little more active with my hobby, with my avocational archaeological part of what I'm interested in, just to do what we're doing today. Have free time to do more research, and I am a longstanding member with the Texas Archaeological Society. Another big part of what I do uh, as a as interested in archaeology is participate in the different events they have throughout the year, which is annual field school in June, an annual meeting in October of every year, and then they have academies, and they are just schoolings on different various entities of archaeology, whether it be um, uh, lithics or pottery or rock art, things
Okay.
like that.
Was there any particular, uh, like say, lithics or pottery or things like that? Is there any particular area that you would gravitate toward?
There is, and I think we touched on that today. You know, we had a presentation out there at the Sibley Learning Center, and the focus was the uh, Midland Discovery, the discovery of a uh, partial Pleistocene human remains found on a local ranch by Keith Glasscock. Um, that period, that particular, we now know that period of time is Paleo-Indian time. I think we're comfortable saying that is in that Folsom Midland time period, which is about 10,000 years old. So to the point, that's it. That's my favorite time period is that Paleo period, and not just the Folsom culture, but but that entire Paleo period of Clovis, Folsom, Plainview, and First View.
So you started out working in the oil business, Illinois?
I did.
Okay. And I guess I'm assuming that that's what brought you to Texas was transfer for a job with an oil company.
That's correct, Michael. That was
Okay.
with Texaco. I started out for about the first 5 years. I was on a seismograph crew, and and we came to Texas originally moving to Lubbock, and that opened up the Wild West for me, the archaeology, the Western way of life, and and a lot of the guys on this seismic crew um, were collectors, were collectors of artifacts, and so when I got a the picture and a view of what they were doing, and saw projectile points and some of the neat stuff that they had been collecting, because these guys they'd been all over the North America, some of them even up to Canada, so they were very familiar with the whole North America and the typology and the geology and and artifacts. And so that's kind of where, when I came to Texas, I got the bug and started to collect artifacts.
Uh, for our listeners, if you're familiar with Sibley Nature Center, we're about educating our citizens about the uniqueness of our home. And when I say our home, I'm talking about the Llano Estacado, that plateau that we live on. And so the Llano Estacado, I grew up in Amarillo. And I was born in Clovis, New Mexico, and I've lived for 17 years in Lubbock, and so I've lived all over this plateau, and so this Llano Estacado plateau is in my blood, it's in my DNA, and so this will always be home for me. And so I was fascinated by your talk this morning about the Midland Discovery, and you mentioned basically what the Midland Discovery was, but um, tell us what was all was involved in that. If somebody were to ask, well, what is the Midland Discovery? You mentioned about Pleistocene skeletal remains, uh, like what parts of the body?
Um, yes. So if you're actually talking about the Pleistocene human remains that Keith
Yeah.
Glasscock found in 1953, um, you're talking about skeletal remains. Um, there wasn't very much of the skeletal remains that Glasscock picked up and collected and started this Midland discovery. Um, Very minute pieces. The skull, which we have a cast of, which we demonstrated and showed our audience at Sibley, um, is actually the bigger portion and the majority of the skeleton. Um, Other than that, it's just bits and pieces. metacarpals, a rib bone, um, and that's about it. Most of her, and of course, one of the when someone in the audience asked about what happened to the rest of her, and that's a good question. There's nobody gonna be able to answer
Yeah.
that. When you consider her age, it being 10,000 years old, there's a lot of things that could happen, and most of it could be just sheer weathering and erosion, alluvial, aeolian, all that stuff that goes on out here in this part of the country. And uh, and then it could be as simple as um, the fact that varmints at an early stage after she deceased could have got a hold of it. It's frequent that that happens, and she just got dismembered and scattered, all over the place.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned that it was a female skeletal material. There is a plaque that you mentioned, a historical plaque here in Midland at the, say
The
where's
Midland Courthouse.
at the Midland
Yes,
Courthouse,
sir.
talking about the Midland Man. And so this discovery was known for years and years and years as Midland Man. Well, we now know that it was a woman. Could you tell us a little bit more about that? What we can possibly ascertain from what little is remains of her, what we do know about this Midland woman.
Sure. That's pretty interesting. Um, the our main our physical anthropologist we'd mentioned during the presentation. This is T.D. Stewart um, at the Smithsonian Institute, and our principal investigator, our archaeologist, Dr. Fred Windorf, sent the all of the skeletal material to him, and he's the one that put the skull back together. Um, and through that, um, that's where all of the information comes from that gives us um, the information we now have as to far as uh, who she might have been, how old she might have been, whether she was male or female. All that came from Dr. Stewart's analysis and restructure of the skull back in 1953. And of course, those, as we talked earlier, the uh, the characteristics after he put the skull together and the characteristics of the skull, um, the few teeth that they did find during the discovery, and the wear pattern and how worn they were, which were moderate to extremely worn, which also was an indication of her age, and then the sutures in the skull themselves, and now how they had developed, um, and then to add on just even though we had just a few, uh, the skeletal remains was there weren't there wasn't much. It was enough to say that uh, talk about her stature and how big she was, and I think that Dr. Stewart believed that she was relatively a small in stature or even a petite type of person, and you can even see that in the skull that we've got a replica of. And so those are the type of things and the characteristics that that allowed TD to write a report that is in the Midland Discovery book and describe her in a little more detail and what she looked like and who she was and how old she was.
You mentioned the term Pleistocene as far as a geologic and historical time frame. Uh, we're talking about essentially in common terms as ice age, and so ice age material, and so human remains coming from that time period is pretty rare, I assume.
I think it is. um, Occasionally, I think there are more discoveries, but in the early part of the 19th century up to 1953, I think the discovery of human remains during that time period toward the end of the Pleistocene age was pretty rare. That's correct.
Right? Um, finding such a thing, such a discovery out in nature, just speaking for myself, my imagination really starts to wander. And, there's no way of knowing, I'm sure, of what exactly did transpire. But what were some of the animals? I mean, she was by herself, I'm assuming, and there were some pretty significant animals that she would have shared the landscape with. Uh, like what?
Um, I think, Michael, that um, that's something that we'll never really know um, exactly. And somebody asked the question, "What happened to her?" And that's a good question. These paleo people, they were hunter gatherers. Um, they were, and so the question is, was she gathering? Was she by herself? Um, was she attacked? Did she just get lost? Did she get disoriented? Did she get hurt? Those are questions that we're not going to have answers to. Or could it have been, with her uh, uh, Folsom Midland group? Did she just pass naturally within her hunter gatherers group? And one question that the archaeologist had back then was, and they don't really know, did she pass naturally? And did they actually um, dig a burial pit for her and lay her down in that pit? So we don't really know what happened to her, and we never will. If she was buried in a pit, some kind of a little burial pit, and then over the years, um, through erosion, a wearing away of those top layers of sand, of the 4 different sands that we've got out there in the Scarborough site, um, did it just wear down to where she was just the remains um, laying on this gray sand? And all good questions and really interesting, but boy, it's so hard to tell with no more evidence than we currently have.
Yeah, at the Sibley Nature Center, we've got um, an exhibit going on right now of animals of the West Texas Ice Age, and you know, so many animals that are alive today existed back then as well, and they survived the Pleistocene extinction event or events, but a lot of animals did not. Things like mammoths and mastodons and short-faced bears and ground sloths and things like that, they're gone. Why do you think that? What was going on at the Pleistocene that might contribute to the extinction of some these megafaunal animals, but yet others survived? What do you envision was going on environmentally or anything like that?
Good question. I think some of the theories that the archaeological paleontology communities have, it varies a little bit. Um, was it just environment? The uh, sudden change in environment to going to of an environment that is more conducive to what they were used to and what they could survive in? Is that what it was? Um, I think there's some train of thought uh, that it was a human-activated event. Did the population, did that Paleo-Indian population grow to a point where they just overran the population of the mammoth or the bison, antiquus, or whichever particular uh, animal they were hunting? Was it just overhunting? Um, so those are just a couple of the theories. Environment, or was it man-made? Um, Disease? Um, and so just it varies. I don't think anyone has a particular answer as to the extinction of that megafauna group that roamed those southern high plains and this Llano Estacado that we've been talking about all day.
Um, I asked the question about the extent of this population of people. We talked about so Folsom and Midland cultures, they lived at the same time.
Um, we're to the point, Michael, where I don't think there's any question
Okay.
that we know that the Folsom culture um, and the Midland uh, are contemporaneous, happened at the same time. Basically, it is the Folsom culture. We're just talking about two different styles of point type when we talk about the Folsom projectile as one point type, and then we can talk about the Midland projectile point type. And those two are contemporaneous. They all fall within that Folsom cultural group. And the only difference between the two is the common belief of is the way they were made. The Folsom, of course, has that beautiful channel flake up the most of the time, up the entire length of the projectile point, the flute,
Okay.
and the other, and the Midland point does not. Other than that, I think that shifting sands, which I have talked about during my presentation, absolutely verifies that these two point types were both were one and the same and contemporaneous, and were both made and napped by the Clovis culture.
So would you say then that that the Folsom and the Midland is actually one culture? I mean, perhaps they associated with each other?
Yeah, I don't think they were separate culture.
Okay.
This is the Folsom people, uh, the Folsom culture, and they were just napping. These are two different styles of projectile points that they were famous for.
Okay. So really, we're just talking about difference in a artistic or a functional style of a projectile point.
Yes.
That's really all that separates the two. So really, they probably possibly the same peoples.
I don't think there's any question.
Okay.
It was the same group. Uh, let's just say that the belief is that the uh, Midland Point was a different style of napping, and why didn't it have a flute? Um, and there are several theories behind that. Was it just more of a preference, or did it have to do with the resources? One theory is that if you get, and these guys are hunter gatherers, so they had a specific pattern probably that they engaged seasonally throughout the year, and they as they moved in their hunting and gathering styles. Um, so if they're away from their resource, if they're away from their uh, toolstone and their quarries, um, but you have your lithics and you're making new projectile points, Um, do you put a flute in them? Do you build do you build that stop um, when you're napping that Midland point, and don't put a flute in it because um, you may cause a break, you may destroy the point, you may ruin your projectile. Uh, the flute's a tricky little fluting. Those people were masters. The Folsom people that napped these projectiles were absolutely uh, skilled in their craft. But the flute is yet another thing. And so, is that what happened? Did they stop short because they didn't have um, enough material with them, and they were too far away from their resource to replenish? So they stopped short of fluting to protect the point and still have a useful weapon and hunting weapon in the Midland Point.
Okay.
But that's a good question, and it that to flute or not to flute, it's debatable. It's an
Okay.
interesting topic.
Yeah. Well, what quarry did most of these Midland Folsom points come from?
Good question. I think probably most of the Flint or chert, whichever you prefer, probably came from quarries down in the Edwards Plateau area.
Okay, yeah, yeah. I was looking at it, and they all seem, most of them that I've seen kind of have this kind of grayish, tannish sort of color to them. But from being from Amarillo, we're real close to the Albates Flint Quarry, and that's some really colorful stuff.
It is. Um, yes, their quality of flint, wherever they got it, was excellent.
Yeah.
Very few anomalies. It was just a quality of flint that they had uh, discovered and used. I mean, the Folsom and the Midland Points both don't stray to me. They're all pretty similar in the quality of the flint. So wherever they were getting, they recognized that quality, and it probably made them um, the ability to nap that quality um, with being such a high quality flint enabled them their skilled nappers uh, to nap such a high quality,
Uh-huh.
beautiful projectile point.
It makes me wonder. You've got these quarries, and I don't know how extensive the Edwards chert is. I mean, is it found all over in the hill country, or is there just a small pocket of chert? And where I'm going with this is, I wonder if there is some type of commerce system, a trade system, in which this chert could be distributed all over the place.
Um, th- so as far as I'm not going to be able to answer that directly. There are some studies and there are some archaeologists that have studied uh, locations and quarries and what type of flint, like you mentioned, the Alabates up around Amarillo. Um, and so that's kind of a whole new, um, uh, it's kind of an area that's a little bit out of my
Oh,
expertise.
okay, okay.
Um, no problem. And but so I don't really know, but I would
Right.
say that the Edwards Plateau area, the Edwards Chert, probably uh, some of it did come from that area.
Okay. Well, since we're using interchangeably, in a way, Midland and Folsom, I'd like for you to me, it's exciting just knowing about that, the impacts of this, the scientific ramifications, and just the discovery itself of that first Folsom point. So, could you talk about the Folsom discovery?
Um, yes, and I mentioned it. And I have and it was in one of the slides, and that was a Folsom point. It's a perfect point, except with the exception of one small ear being broke off. Um, that's an important projectile, just being found on the Crowfoot Ranch, west of Folsom, New Mexico. That was excavated in 1926, and it was a long time coming. That point was excavated between the ribs of an extinct bison, Bison antiquus, um, and it opened the eyes of the archaeological paleontology community and pushed back that time period of humanity coming into the New World as they spoke of it in 1953, and pushed it back thousands of years to 10,000 years ago. Um, the start of that story is pretty interesting, Michael. There was a cowboy by the name of George McJunkin, and he was quite kind of a character. Um, and a pretty sharp little guy. In 1908, there was a flood up in Folsom, New Mexico, um, that flooded the town, but came across, this floodplain came across this Crowfoot Ranch. So after the flood, after all the damage, George McJunkin was out there riding the range, and he was actually the discoverer of this site. As he's riding along a wash or a draw, he noticed some bones had washed out from this flood on the side of an embankment. And he looked, and he knew his cattle, and he knew his ranching, and he realized and recognized that these bones, this skeletal remain of these bison, are way bigger than what my cattle are. This is pretty odd. It caught his attention. So this is 1908, and it took a while, from 1908 to 1926, before this information and the interest and just talking to the right people at the right time to finally get a museum out of Denver to come up there with paleontologists and some archaeologists and start to actually take interest in this site and excavate it and finally find this Folsom projectile in between, within the remains of this bison kill in between two ribs of a extinct bison.
So where is all this? I've done a little bit of archaeology reading, and for so long, science, archaeological sciences pushed Clovis first type theory. Where does the Clovis culture come into play? I mean, was it a long time before the Folsom Midland, or not that long before?
They're neighbors, Michael. The Clovis culture butts right up against the Folsom culture. I mean, they're just one right after another. When you're looking at the chronology of the Paleo-Indian period, at least out in our area, it seems to be Clovis, Folsom, Plainview, and First View in that order as far as chronological dates go. So yes, and Clovis was the original discovery of Clovis, which comes from Blackwater Draw over there around Portales and Clovis, New Mexico, was the first thought. and built that paradigm of the uh, first people to cross the Bering Strait and come into North America, or as Dr. Fred Windorf would say, and Kreger, uh, call it the New World.
Um, but as far as uh, say they were neighbors, I'm trying to picture that. So as whether you mean, well, the Clovis people lived over here, and the Midland Folsom people lived over there, or he talked about differences in time, a gradual transition between one culture and another culture, and no real overlap between peoples.
That's correct.
Okay.
Neighbor was probably the wrong word to use, so let's scratch that
Okay.
and just go to time periods.
Okay.
But when you look at the chronological time periods of the groups that we just and the cultures we just mentioned, that's
Okay.
what it looks like.
Okay.
You have your Clovis time period first, and which eventually evolves into that Clovis culture.
You mentioned a paradigm, and I think the people who come up with the definitive statements that the paradigms are based on, I think the surrounding people are always wanting, trying to chip away at that, and for a paradigm shift. And so I understand that there's been some considerable paradigm shifting that's been going on in the past few years of this Clovis first hypothesis that perhaps there were people here even before the Clovis folks got here.
Michael, I don't think there's any question uh, that most of the experts believe uh, that there was a pre-Clovis culture. Um, it's I don't know that the paradigm has completely shifted, but I think that paradigm and that thought has shifted significantly with a lot of our professionals in the field of archaeology. Um, I don't know, and I haven't studied a lot of pre-Clovis investigations and excavations, uh, but I have no doubt it would just make sense that there is pre-Clovis um, passage and earlier groups that had come into North America previous and prior to the Clovis culture. I think it just makes sense. And I think the longer that we excavate and dig around and keep an interest in it, I think eventually there will be substantial evidence that to prove that.
Yeah. Uh, Two of our more local pre-Clovis sites that have really gained a lot of attention, it's certainly gotten my attention, is what's going on with the what are called the ghost tracks, the human footprints there in the White Sands area, and also here in Texas, the Gault site. Uh, can you tell us anything that what you know about, like, say, the Gault site?
Right. Excuse me, that was an interesting question from the young lady at the
Yeah,
presentation.
yeah.
She's the one that brought up the footprints. Um, I don't know a lot about those footprints in in that area and how they relate. From what she described, it sounds like they may fit into this paleo time period somewhere between, say, 12,000 and 7,500 years ago. It makes sense from what little bit she learned from one of the from a guide out there where she was at. Excuse me. The Gault site, that's one of my favorites. I don't know as much about it as I'd like to, but the Gault site, of course, is an interesting site and probably has produced uh, more uh, Paleo-Clovis material than probably about any other site in North America as far as just sheer lithics and indications of a particular culture at a particular area. Um, I think we have uh, Dr. Michael Collins to thank for that. He was um, he was that was his forte. That was something that he was driving the bus on the development of the finding and the development of that particular site. Um, and it is carried on, and I think they still do. I believe they still work at that site occasionally. Don't hold me to that. And what's interesting about that area is within that general area, I know there are also some early studies on Pre-Clovis. So I think there are some strong indications, and they've been working on it for years, that there are some archaeological investigations close to the Gault site that do merit Pre-Clovis occupation.
Right. Yeah, there's a just absolutely wonderful PBS video about the Gault site and specifically about Dr. Michael Collins, and it's a fantastic story. And so, if you if I encourage people who are watching this podcast to check out this video about Dr. Collins and the Gault site, and it's just an amazing story. Uh, not just because the science itself, but the nature of Dr. Collins himself and trying to get this dream established, and it's a real tearjerker.
I'm glad you mentioned that.
Yeah.
It's a documentary that
Yeah.
I have not seen yet, but I've got it on my list. I'm glad you reminded me of
Oh,
that.
yeah,
I've
yeah,
heard rave reviews that it is
yeah.
you've just got to see it. So
Yes.
I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah, we showed it at Sibley on one of our, film nights, and,
Mm.
yeah, you gotta see that.
I did have the privilege of working at the Gault site one year as a TAS member, Texas Archaeological Society. They had a field school at
Uh-huh.
Gault in 2001, and at that time, I knew what Gault was. I knew how important it was, and when I heard that they were having a field school, I knew that I wanted to go. And I told a couple of my kids, and they were that age where they could camp and travel and go with me. It was our first field school, and I said, "Guys, get your pillows and your sleeping bags. We're going to Gault. We're going to TAS field school." And just to go down there and work at that Gault site, and we only did it one year, it was an absolute thrill.
Yeah. Yeah, I got to work at, I worked in the lab, but, for, oh, I don't remember, 2, maybe 3 summers up at Lubbock Lake Landmark in Lubbock, and people come from all over the world, attending their field classes and schools and things like that. Did you ever do any work out at, Lubbock Lake?
I did not,
Okay.
excuse me, I did not ever work at Lubbock Lake. I have been up to the museum, I've been to the Lubbock Lake site, and I've heard plenty of presentations on it. But yeah, all those are classic sites. The Gault site, Lubbock Lake, uh, the famous Clovis site up in Blackwater Draw that we talked about, up at Portales in the Clovis, New Mexico area, all classic sites. And no, I wish I had. I wish I'd worked at all of them.
Yeah.
But at this point, the Gault site is the only one that I've actually spent time at.
Well, I think some of all this information is, you know, we really live in a fascinating part of the world. There's amazing history, ancient history. There's, you know, uh, people tend to focus on the negatives of this region. It's not necessarily a picture postcard, but once you delve into the things, how long humanity has been here, this really is a fascinating part of the world which we live in.
Michael, I couldn't agree with you more. I know the news people that came out and visited with us this morning, and one of the last uh, questions that they brought up was uh, any other comments that you have as we finish this interview. And I think that's what it was. I think you hit the nail on the head when you talk about the area that we live in and the surroundings that we have and what's actually out there. And that was kind of my message um, at the end of those interviews is for people to be aware of uh, of their surroundings, of their counties, of the Llano Estacado, places to camp, places to hike, historical spots to look at, and just be aware, other than the fact that you uh, just work and and go to school, uh, look around and get involved in your community and be interested and learn about where you're at. It'll make things more interesting, and I just couldn't agree with you more. I think it's a neat place. Of course, I'm a little biased because we've got so much history and culture in that paleo time period within this Llano Estacado and these southern high plains that for me, it's not it's easy for me to enjoy that and recognize that. But there's a lot of other historical and cool things out there
Absolutely,
that I
yeah,
would like that I'd like the public,
yeah.
in general to be aware of.
Well, even beside just the historical and the archaeological wonders, there are also wonders of nature here. Uh, it's you just need to learn how to look, and the beauty of nature is all around you.
Mhm.
And that's the type of lessons that we're trying to get across to our citizens about the uniqueness of our home on the Llano Estacado, and that it is really and truly a place of wonder, a place of, uh, of just discovering nature, and because and it's here. We often think, well, it's just an oil patch. No, it's more than that. A lot more than that. Just need to learn how to look. Well, this seems like a good stopping spot, and I want to thank you, Barth, for participating in this podcast, and I don't know what else to say except thank you.
Michael, you're quite welcome, and I appreciate and I've enjoyed the invitation to join you in this podcast down here this afternoon.